Sarah Martinez had learned long ago that laughter often came at her expense. As she stood in the mirror of the restaurant bathroom, adjusting her thrift store dress for the third time, she could hear the familiar echo of whispered jokes and stifled giggles from her coworkers. The cruel irony wasn't lost on her. They'd convinced her this blind date was real, that someone had actually requested to meet the quiet girl from accounting. But Sarah had seen the smirks, caught the exchanged glances. She knew she was walking into another setup, another moment designed to remind her of her place in their social hierarchy. What they didn't know was that Sarah had stopped caring about their opinions the day she'd held her dying mother's hand in that sterile hospital room, promising to carry forward the kindness that had defined Maria Martinez's life. What they couldn't see beneath her worn clothes and shy demeanor was a heart that had learned to find joy in small acts of service, staying late to help overwhelmed colleagues, bringing homemade soup to sick neighbors, volunteering at the children's shelter every weekend, despite barely making ends meet herself. As Sarah walked back to the table, she noticed her date hadn't arrived yet. The hostess kept glancing at her with poorly concealed pity, and Sarah's co-workers at the nearby table were practically vibrating with anticipation for the inevitable moment when no one would show up. She ordered a water and waited, determined to give whoever was supposed to come at least 30 minutes before she quietly slipped out and spared everyone the grand finale of their joke. 27 minutes later, the restaurant door burst open with the kind of urgency that made heads turn. A tall man in a rumpled business suit rushed in, his dark hair disheveled as if he'd been running his hands through it. He scanned the room frantically before his eyes landed on Sarah, and she watched something shift in his expression, surprise, perhaps even relief. "Sarah?" His voice carried a slight breathlessness as he approached. "I'm so sorry I'm late. I'm Marcus." She nodded, studying his face for signs of the disappointment she was accustomed to seeing. Instead, she found genuine concern and what looked like exhaustion etched in the lines around his eyes. "It's okay," she said softly, the words automatic after years of making others comfortable with her presence. Marcus slid into the seat across from her, and Sarah noticed the way he immediately pulled out his phone to check it before putting it face down on the table with deliberate finality. "I was at the hospital," he said, and something in his voice made Sarah lean forward slightly. "My daughter Emma, she's 7, had another panic attack. The third one this month." The casual cruelty of her co-workers' prank suddenly felt microscopic compared to the raw worry emanating from this stranger. Sarah's own discomfort dissolved into genuine concern. "Is she okay now?" "She is, thanks to her incredible babysitter who knew exactly what to do." Marcus's smile was tired but grateful. "Emma has anxiety about me dating. She lost her mom 3 years ago, and she's terrified that anyone new in my life will take me away from her." Sarah felt her throat tighten. She understood that kind of fear intimately. The desperate need to hold on to the people who mattered when you'd already lost too much. "That must be so hard for both of you." "It is." Marcus's honesty was refreshing. After years of surface-level conversations, "I probably shouldn't even be here, but my assistant insisted I needed to start somewhere. She's the one who arranged this through some mutual connection at your office." The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. Marcus's assistant had been contacted by someone at Sarah's company, likely pitched this as a favor, a setup with a nice girl who would be grateful for the attention. Her co-workers had probably expected her to be flustered and starstruck by a successful businessman, making the eventual rejection even more entertaining. But looking at Marcus now, Sarah saw something her tormentors had missed entirely. Behind his expensive suit and confident bearing was a father carrying an enormous weight, someone who'd been pushed into a situation he wasn't ready for by well-meaning people who didn't understand the complexity of his grief and responsibility. "You should be with Emma," Sarah said quietly, "not sitting here with a stranger because someone convinced you it was time to move on." Marcus blinked, clearly not expecting such directness. You're probably right, but I'm already here and you've been waiting." He paused, studying her face. "Though you don't seem particularly surprised that your date showed up." Reluctantly and distracted, Sarah almost smiled at that. "Let's just say I've learned to manage my expectations." Something in her tone must have given her away because Marcus's expression shifted, his business executive's instincts clearly picking up on the undercurrents of the situation. His eyes moved briefly to the table where her co-workers sat, their disappointed faces now poorly concealed behind menus. "Sarah," Marcus said carefully, "were you expecting me not to show up at all?" The question hung between them, and Sarah felt the familiar burn of humiliation in her cheeks. But there was something in Marcus's voice, not pity, but a kind of understanding, that came from his own experience with being pushed into uncomfortable situations. "It doesn't matter," she said, reaching for her purse. "You should go be with Emma. I can take care of the water." "Wait." Marcus's hand moved across the table, stopping just short of touching hers. "What if I told you that Emma specifically asked me to bring home a story about kindness tonight? She's been having trouble sleeping, and stories about good people doing good things are the only ones that help." Sarah paused, her hand still on her purse strap. "What kind of story?" "The kind where someone shows compassion to a stranger without expecting anything in return. The kind where someone puts another person's needs above their own. Comfort." Marcus's eyes were steady on hers. "The kind of story I think I'm living right now. Watching you try to give me an easy exit because you can see I'm struggling." For the first time all evening, Sarah felt something genuine pass between them. Not the manufactured connection of a forced date, but the recognition of two people who understood what it meant to carry burdens quietly. "Tell you what," Marcus continued, "instead of this being a date neither of us really wants, what if we just be two people sharing a meal? You can tell me what made you kind enough to let a stranger off the hook, and I'll tell you about a little girl who's teaching me that. Sometimes the scariest thing isn't losing someone. It's letting someone new matter." They talked for 2 hours, not about the superficial getting-to-know-you topics that filled most first dates, but about loss and resilience, about finding joy in small moments and carrying forward the values of people who'd shaped them. Marcus told her about Emma's favorite books and her fear of thunderstorms, about trying to be both mother and father while running a company that employed 300 people. Sarah shared stories about her mother's unwavering optimism, about the children at the shelter who reminded her weekly that hope could survive even the hardest circumstances. When Marcus walked her to her car, Sarah's co-workers were long gone, their entertainment having turned into something they couldn't easily mock. As she reached for her door handle, Marcus spoke her name softly. "Sarah, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." She turned, and in the parking lot lamplight, she could see the same exhaustion in his face that had been there when he'd first arrived. But there was something else now, a kind of clarity she hadn't expected. "Those people from your office," he said. "They set this up as some kind of joke, didn't they? You were supposed to be the punchline." Sarah felt her cheeks burn, but she nodded. There was no point in pretending anymore. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his hands in his pockets as he looked up at the stars barely visible above the city lights. When he spoke again, his voice carried a weight that made Sarah's breath catch. "I need to tell you something about Emma's mom." "About Lisa. She died because she was trying to help someone else. A car accident on her way to bring medicine to our elderly neighbor during a snowstorm." His voice remained steady, but Sarah could hear the controlled emotion underneath. "For 3 years I've been angry about that. Angry that her kindness took her away from us." Sarah waited, sensing there was more. "But sitting here tonight, watching you show grace to someone who was essentially a stranger, watching you put my needs and Emma's needs above your own dignity, I remembered something I'd forgotten. Lisa didn't die because she was kind. She lived because she was kind. And that kindness is still alive in this world, in people like you." Before Sarah could respond, Marcus continued, his words coming faster now, as if he'd been holding them back all evening. "I know this is crazy. I know we just met. But Emma needs to see that kindness still exists, that good people still matter. And I need to stop being afraid that loving someone new means forgetting someone who's gone." He took a breath. "Sarah Martinez, will you marry me?" The question hung in the night air between them, and Sarah felt the world tilt on its axis. Not because of romance or fairy tale magic, but because someone had seen the part of her that her co-workers had tried to turn into a punchline, her unfailing kindness, and recognized it as something valuable enough to build a life around. "Marcus," she whispered, "you don't really know me. I know you stayed at a table where you knew you were being mocked because you didn't want to hurt the feelings of someone who might actually show up. I know you encouraged me to leave because you could see I was worried about my daughter. I know that in 2 hours of conversation, you never once said anything unkind about the people who tried to humiliate you tonight." His voice softened. "I know that Emma needs someone who understands that love isn't about grand gestures. It's about showing up every day with a heart that chooses kindness, even when kindness hasn't been shown to you." Sarah thought about her mother's hand in hers, about the promise she'd made to carry forward love in a world that often forgot its power. She thought about Emma, a little girl learning to navigate loss and fear, and about Marcus, a man trying to honor his wife's memory while still living fully. "Yes," she said, the word escaping before her rational mind could intervene. "Yes, I'll marry you." 6 months later, at a small ceremony in the children's shelter where Sarah volunteered, Emma Martinez Thompson walked her soon-to-be stepmother down the aisle, both of them wearing matching smiles and flowers in their hair. The guests included 300 employees from Marcus's company, dozens of families from the shelter, and notably absent were the co-workers who had orchestrated what they'd thought would be Sarah's most humiliating evening. As Marcus and Sarah exchanged vows they'd written together, promises to choose, kindness, to honor those they'd lost by loving those they'd found, to build a family founded on the radical act of seeing the best in each other, Emma stood between them, holding both their hands, no longer afraid that love meant loss. Later, people would call it the most romantic proposal in the city's history. But Sarah knew better. It wasn't romance that had transformed that evening from a cruel joke into the beginning of something beautiful. It was the simple, revolutionary act of recognizing that in a world that often celebrates the loudest voices, the greatest strength sometimes lies in the quiet certainty of a kind heart that refuses to be hardened by unkindness. And in the end, that kindness had done exactly what Sarah's mother always promised it. It had multiplied, creating something larger than the sum of its parts, something strong enough to build a lifetime on.